In this next video from War, Art and Visual Culture Sydney, Dr. Paul Lowe from University Arts London chairs a session with the researcher Andrew Tenison. I hope you enjoy this video.
In the landscape of contemporary warfare, some of the most potent and influential images of war are those made by contemporary transnational jihadists and their associated movements. A potent visual and audio sub-theme of contemporary jihadism is that of battlefield martyrdom, which, although having a long and complex history within broader Islamic tradition, has risen in public consciousness in recent years as it's become more visualised and routinized. The creation of visual and audio content extolling martyrdom serves a number of purposes, including the publicising of the martyrs' last wishes, celebrating their actions, informing family and friends of their deaths, and inspiring others by depicting the martyrs as heroes who should be emulated. The visual and audio language of contemporary jihadism is vast both on and offline. Jihadist movements have long created and extolled their own visual and audio language through mediums such as journals, pamphlets, magazines, sound recordings, motion film, and jihadi anashid, a cappella chants or songs. The age of the internet has seen a wider dissemination and gradually increased professional presentation of such material across geographic, ethnic, linguistic, and cultural boundaries. While it is understandable that the focus is often given to violent operational elements of jihadi culture, it is important to consider the way in which visual and audio means are used by jihadists to fight their perceived enemies in a type of informational warfare. Jihadi culture has in general become an important theme of academic study within the last few years, with publications such as Hegghammer's Jihadi Culture, the Art and Social Practices of Militant Islamists appearing in 2017. Contemporary jihadism comes with its own themes and visual symbols that draw from traditional Islamic doctrine and history. Some of these themes include the foundational victories of the early Islamic community and the subsequent conquests of the 7th and 8th century, the Islamic awakening beginning in the 1970s and up until the present day. This presentation, though, will focus on one very specific symbol found within contemporary jihadi culture, that of the green bird, which is doctrinally linked via the Quran, the Hadith, the traditions, and the Tafsir, Quranic commentary, to the theme of martyrdom and the resting place of battlefield martyrs in Islamic paradise, or Jannah. In this presentation, I'll explain how the symbol of the green bird originates from within Islamic doctrine and is used by jihadists today to eulogise, communicate, and legitimise their actions. Systems of belief influence visual and audio culture, and this is certainly relevant for systems of belief that are social, political, and religious in nature. I will discuss two of many examples of how the symbol is used in contemporary context. First, I will show how it was used in content created by jihadists aligned to the Islamic State to promote those fighting in the Battle of Marawi in the Philippines in 2017. Secondly, I will show an example of how the green bird was used on an Instagram tribute post dedicated to Farhad Jabbar, who murdered New South Wales police accountant Curtis Chang in 2015. I will conclude this presentation with an alternative picture of martyrdom, as portrayed by contemporary jihadists, in showing a photograph by Canadian documentary photographer Louis Pellew. Pellew's photograph offers a sobering visual counterpoint to the worship of death and the glorification of martyrdom found within jihadi culture. Here is an image generated by the Islamic State that is a good visual example of jihadist use of the green bird symbol. Where, however, do jihadists get the idea that the green bird is amongst the highest points of human evolution? The answer is found within the Hadith literature. The Hadith literature is the reported sayings and deeds of Muhammad, the historic founder of Islam. Although the green bird symbol is mentioned in a number of Hadith collections, its most prominent position is in the Hadith of Imam Muslim, who lived from 815 to 875. Muslim was a highly respected Islamic scholar and compiler of Hadith, and his Hadith collection is widely considered the second most authentic within Sunni Islam. I'm going to read the Hadith that talks about the green birds because doing so helps with understanding why jihadists use the symbol to refer to martyrdom within their visual and audio culture. Sahih Muslim 1887. It has been narrated on the authority of Masrak, who said, "We ask Abdullah about the Quranic verse, 'Think not of those who are slain in Allah's way as dead, nay they are alive, finding their sustenance in the presence of their Lord.' Quran 3169. He said, "We asked the meaning of the verse from the Holy Prophet, who said, 'The souls of the martyrs live in the bodies of green birds, who have their nests in chandeliers hung from the throne of the Almighty. They eat the fruits of paradise from wherever they like, and they nestle in these chandeliers.' Once their Lord cast a glance at them and said, 'Do ye want anything?' They said, 'What more shall we desire? We eat the fruit of paradise from wherever we like.' their Lord asked them the same question thrice. When they saw that they would continue to be asked and not left without answering the question, they said, O Lord, we wish that thou mayest return our souls to our bodies so that we may be slain in thy way once again. When he, Allah, saw that they had no need, they were left to their joy in heaven. The Greenbird Hadith assists with interpreting prominent verses from the Quran that elevate and are associated with martyrdom, namely Surah 3, 169-70, about those who are killed in Allah's way, i.e. martyred. These specific Quranic verses have been alluded to by jihadists in video statements or interviews with media outlets, jihadist run or otherwise. Here's an example of a Taliban commander relaying the sentiment of this verse to a Vice News reporter following the Battle of Kunduz in Afghanistan in 2015. These verses are doctrinally and historically linked to an early Islamic battle, the Battle of Uhud, where a number of believers were killed in the fighting, and in light of this, there was a need to justify the importance of martyrdom. Note that the Quran verses are quoted directly here within the Hadith. Think not of those who were slain in Allah's way as dead, nay, they are alive, finding their sustenance in the presence of their Lord. It is important to reflect on the fact that the doctrine is clear that those who were slain, i.e. killed while fighting, are actually not dead but alive, and jihadists sow into this doctrine-based concept every time they utilise the green bird symbol. The belief that one is actually not dead but alive would no doubt provide great assurance and a possible psychological advantage when going into battle or attacking a target. The fact that martyrdom is according to doctrine, an assured way to enter Islamic paradise or Jannah should also be considered. The Hadith portrays the martyrs as having achieved high station within Islamic paradise and that they are being well provided for. The provision provided is spelt out more clearly in other canonical Hadith collections such as Jimin al-Tirmidhi, where battlefield martyrs are listed as holding 6 unique qualities in comparison to other believers, including the complete forgiveness of their sins. The use of the green bird symbol has appeared within the social media accounts of jihadists, particularly to eulogise fellow believers. In the Now That's Evolution visual produced by the Islamic State, we see direct reference to the written hadith tradition via the leveraging of the green bird symbol to promote and legitimise martyrdom. In particular, the argument is advanced via visual means that martyrdom is amongst the highest station in Islam. More generally speaking, the idea that martyrdom is the quickest way for a human being to evolve in this life, and no doubt the life in the hereafter, is also being promoted. It could be easy to dismiss use of this doctrine-based symbol as misappropriation or distortion of traditional Islamic doctrine. The question remains though, does the use of the green bird symbol follow any coherent or even a learned interpretation of Islamic doctrine on martyrdom? Is it being used within a plausible context? How would a deeper understanding of the origins of the symbol be helpful to the creation of counter-narratives? The use of the green bird symbol spans the geographic boundaries of transnational jihadist activity from Bosnia in the 1990s to the Middle East and Southeast Asia in more recent years. Here is an example of an audio track uploaded to YouTube that was originally titled In the Hearts of Green Birds, The Martyrs of Bosnia. The content, which is now available on YouTube, originally appeared as a cassette distributed by Azam Publications, a jihadi media production house set up in the late 1990s. The content details the deaths of foreign fighters who had gone to the Balkans in the 1990s, describing their deaths as that of martyrs. The continued leveraging of this symbol also speaks of the desire of jihadists to communicate to fellow believers or sympathisers by referencing doctrine and historic-based symbols. How aware the receiving audience is of the symbol would perhaps depend on the doctrinal knowledge and possible piety of the individual. A contemporary example utilising the green bird symbol is a jihadi anashid titled Brothers in Marawi that was released by Al Hayat, one of the Islamic State's media bureaus, in 2017 at the time of the Battle of Marawi in the Philippines. Anashid has been defined as chants, hymns, or in a form of vocal music, often following a poetic metrical rhythm that predate the beginning of Islam. They are devotional in nature within the Islamic framework though. Anashid extolling martyrdom is usually not dedicated to a single person, but the concept of martyrdom itself, of which Brothers in Marawi is an excellent example. And here's the audio to that.
No.
Oh. Apologies. Play from... I don't know if I'm going to be able to play it from this position.
Diamonds and pearls and palaces await the men of Galilee. Virgins and wine, never-ending time, in gardens with rivers beneath. Holding firm to the rope of Allah, the brothers in Marawi. Engraved in their hearts the love for the Lord, and for Him they continue to bleed. In green birds they will fly through paradise, under Allah's mighty throne. This will now become their home.
The Brothers in Marawi Anashid was also included as a part of an audio backdrop to footage shot by IS-affiliated jihadists during the fighting within Marawi city in 2017. The final film was released as Inside Series 3 and was one part of a series of films released by the Islamic State that year. And here is the footage that references the Anashid.
Believers who would never weaken while seeking honor through their religion. Rather, they would remain steadfast, nourished with patience and certainty. With this, they treat their wounds and endure patiently upon the path of guidance until they achieve either one of the two. And have honored is he who achieves the great victory, alive in the bodies of green birds.
Green birds they will fly through paradise.
Flying about and gazing at their places in Jannah, a paradise which even the surreal beauty of East Asia and the jungles of Marawi cannot be compared to. And their Lord will ask them, "Is there anything you desire?" And they will answer, "O Lord, we ask that you return our souls to our bodies so that we may be martyred for your cause once again."
Brothers in Marawi is sung in English, while the footage narration is also in English, indicating a desire to communicate to English-speaking audiences. A Filipino language version of the film also exists, with the English language Anashid intact, interestingly. The Anashid is sung a cappella, in keeping with jihadist attempts to maintain doctrinal purity by the avoidance of instrumentation. Brothers in Marawi employs a number of symbols that speak of Islamic paradise and are found both in the Quran and the Hadith literature, including references to gardens, water, wine, and female companions. This is quite obviously used in a jihadist visual and audio content to symbolise or allude to the idyllic resting place, i.e. Islamic paradise, of those who die fighting in the path of Allah. The greenbird symbol appears several lines into the Anashid and is heard playing in the video at a point where a number of the jihadists have been wounded, are bleeding out, and in some cases succumbing to their wounds. The English-speaking narrator reinforces their martyrdom by suggesting that the jihadists are now alive in the bodies of green birds, in keeping with the Hadith literature. The impact of the lyric line about the jihadists continuing to bleed is no doubt brought into stark relief by footage of some of the jihadists actually bleeding and eventually succumbing to their wounds. Another recent use of the greenbird symbol appeared on an Instagram tribute page dedicated to jihadi teen Farhad Jabbar, who murdered New South Wales police accountant Curtis Chang in 2015. The use of the greenbird symbol here is very straightforward and is an excellent example of the symbol becoming a simple and direct shorthand for martyrdom within and beyond jihadi visual culture. The greenbird symbol overlaid on a video still from CCTV footage of Jabbar during his attack is similar or near identical to those commonly used by jihadis to eulogise their martyrs on social media. Here the use of the symbol presents as a kind of visual disruption or hijacking of the footage, which was originally used to report the attack in mainstream media. While Jabbar was certainly young, he was 15 and probably impressionable. A key point when considering the use of the greenbird symbol to eulogise him would have to be his intentions. Some of his supporters believed him to be a martyr, and conversations monitored by law enforcement after the murder revealed as such. A handwritten note found with his body following the attack was addressed to the disbelievers and concluded, "By the will of Allah, I have come today to put terror into your hearts, and soon the Mujahideen will do the same." But perhaps of greater insight regarding the theme of martyrdom is a recent courtroom statement by Milad Ate, who supplied Jabbar with the gun he used to kill Chang. Ate recently retracted his statement of remorse for his actions and sympathy for Chang's widow and family, and is reported to have told the court, "Remember this, I've sold my life for a cheap price, and that is the next life, because this world is only temporary, and the hereafter is eternal." Jabbar and Ate may have been young and impressionable, but their statements appear far from incoherent when considering Islamic teaching on martyrdom. Ate's statement indicates at least some level of understanding regarding the dominant discourse of martyrdom that has it linked to fighting in God's path, and the contractual nature of such actions between the believer and Allah. This can be seen in the Quranic verse 9:111, which states, "Allah has brought from the believers their lives and their wealth in return for paradise. They fight in the way of Allah, kill and are killed." Jabbar and Ate's even basic understanding of the belief in the teaching surrounding martyrdom likely played a role in Jabbar's willingness to die for his faith. In concluding this presentation, I offer an alternative picture of martyrdom, as portrayed by Canadian documentary photographer Louis Lowe. Lowe is a photographer well known for his examination of social political issues such as human rights, conflict and poverty. Lowe's photograph offers a sobering visual counterpoint to the worship of death and the glorification of martyrdom found within jihadi culture. While working as a photojournalist in Kandahar, Afghanistan between 2006 and 2010, Lowe made a collection of photographs that were later given the title Black Box from Kandahar. In Lowe's words, the resulting photographs serve as evidence to what the dead and wounds of war look like. The highly graphic photographs cover a number of incidences of IED and gunshot wound victims. Lowe explains that the images weren't selected with composition, aesthetics or artistic goal in mind. There was no intent to shock or sensationalise violence by the photographer. In fact, the side note accompanying the black box states that it is to be used for research purposes only. Lowe has given me permission to show the following photograph, but has requested that the image is not recorded, so please do not photograph or film the following slide. Not that you'd want to. The first photograph from the black box depicts the body of a Taliban facilitator who was killed by the premature detonation of an explosive vest. Here there are no grand statements about sacrifice for Allah's cause, or farewell hugs from fellow fighters, and certainly no film statement of purpose. Rather, we see the mangled body of the individual who failed to facilitate the intended mission and the taking of life. Here there was no glory, no martyrdom to speak of, and the intention to die and to kill in equal part find no resolution. It is possible that in photographs such as these, from the black box from Kandahar, the potential visual counter-narrative or visual disruption exists. And with the daily deluge of jihadi visual and audio content glorifying martyrdom, coherent and considered visual and audio counter-narratives are long overdue. Thank you.
Is the symbol of the bird copyrighted? That's a serious question. Because they're using it like, it seems like open source, you know, free for repurposing and kind of carrying through, which sort of feeds into the whole narrative of this being, if you like media warfare and social media, just kind of spread the message. Yeah. But I think it'd be an interesting question because there's a lot of studies of, especially ISIS, as commercial enterprises, you know, kind of with financial interests, with clear financial goals. And I'm always fascinated by that, by the reading that kind of cuts through, you know, all the sort of propaganda that's sort of associated around it, and looks at it as like an economic manifestation of a series of actions. So you haven't come across any kind of reference to, no? No, I guess with the Hadith literature, it's kind of coming quite a while after Muhammad, you know, is reported to have died. So it's not coming straight after. You know, we're talking 150, 200 years that they're starting to compile this Hadith literature. So that it kind of exists in that space, but then as a modern copyrighted symbol, I don't know. Like the thing about the Islamic State is they're able to kind of they're like a bellbird that just picks off like all different media symbols, and the way that you know, I think of Call of Duty, that video game, and how they use that within their propaganda, the way they leverage just the kind of whole Hollywood look, you know, that shallow depth of field that you see in movies and that kind of thing, that's all about the way they kind of create their propaganda now. Actually, there's a really good film called City of Ghosts, which everyone should watch if they're interested in this subject matter, and it's about a group of guys from the Syrian city of Raqqa, which became the Islamic State de facto capital. And they were basically involved in an informational, they still are really, in an informational war with the Islamic State. But they seem to have this understanding of that informational war, of that media war, that, you know, Western armies are obsessed with, you know, let's bring an army and let's put boots on the ground. But these guys, you know, really on the money in terms of like understanding that the Islamic State, when its trajectory went up, like in 2014, 2015, or a little bit before that, after they moved into Syria and then broke away from Al-Qaeda in Iraq and became their own entity essentially, like they understood that at that point when they took their city, because it was their city, they were living in that city, but they had to flee. A lot of them had to flee, these guys. They understood that there's an informational war element to this and a trading of narratives. And a lot of those narratives, I mean, when I look at CT, counterterrorism writings and stuff like that, people in the West are just completely, it just goes over people's heads. They're not talking about those narratives, you know. They're just talking about like the stuff they know about. But there's a lot of things, so my talk's kind of about that too, that a lot is missed. A lot of the narrative and the language and the trading of information like is missed over the language.
Because they're seen as essentially pre-modern cultures and they should be approached as such. And
Yeah,
there's a blind spot to the fact that they are very savvy in terms of 21st century narratives and manipulation of what they are.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? Because I kind of had a follow-on from that discourse, because you were implying at the end that these counter-narratives should be produced, and I'm wondering by who?
Well, that's a question I have myself,
Yeah.
and it's a question I can't answer in a 20-minute paper, but it's something that I've been thinking about.
It's an interesting one in terms of the role of the academy in that, isn't it? You know, because there are, as you know, anthropologists were involved in the US interventions in Afghanistan to advise on the kind of Hearts and Minds campaign.
Yeah.
Where do we fit in that discourse of are we trying to combat or not?
Yeah. Well, I think the hearts and mind thing is obviously incredibly problematic, isn't it? Or has been problematic historically. But I think that with the example of the City of Ghost documentary, I didn't give you the name of the group. So the name of the group is called Raqqa is Being Slaughtered Silently. You may have heard of that group. And so a number of the guys that are in that group have been killed, and a number have had to flee Syria. They've got into Turkey, and some of them are able to seek asylum within Germany and other parts of Western Europe. And so for me, when I look at that documentary and I read about that group, and you can go to their website, they're actually now writing about what's happening with the Kurdish takeover of Raqqa, and they're very negative about that as well, because the Kurds are kind of importing their own cultural mark on Raqqa, which is, you know, their city. So they're very angry about that as well. But I think there's something in what they were doing in terms of fighting the Islamic State, using the internet, using what they had in front of them, using their cell phones, capturing footage from within the city to publicise the atrocities that the Islamic State was committing within that city and what they were doing to the city, and just what they were doing in general. And, you know, I guess the problem is that you could look at that and go, well, it's citizen journalism, it's not professional journalism, but I think there's something lost if you kind of approach it that way, I think. And I think some of the spokesperson for that group, I forget his name off the top of my head, but they're certainly getting more recognition over the last few years than what they were initially. Yeah.
Good, thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you.